Glass, this morning's guest in Studio 2. This segment brought to you in part by the Benton Rusty, 308 South 2nd Street, and I-80 Towing and Automotive Services, 3830 Cherrywood Loop East. And we want to first point out that if you haven't thought about it, what you will do on February 14th might just include a trip to celebrate the trifecta, Snowy Range Flea Market and Farm Stands anniversary, the second anniversary in business, their operation celebrating 2 years. Congratulations to them coming up February 14th. Also a birthday celebration underway at 1951 Snowy Range Road, along with, of course, Valentine's Day. And all of that fun will have much going on at 1951. The Talk Shop will be on location 10 a.m. to noon on that particular day. Then we go to the Sportsman's Raffle. It's the 13th annual Sportsman's Raffle at the University of Wyoming Fieldhouse. So doors open at 5 p.m. and you, in supporting that event, will support the Meredith and Jeannie Ray Cancer Center. And you can take part in that with a stop by the Fly Store, the West Laramie Fly Store, or Ivanson Memorial Hospital Foundation Office for details. Brett, you and I were talking off air just about a few important things. One, the impervious water situation in Laramie, the surface water management program. What are your thoughts now after Senator Gary Crumb's initiative to clarify his attempt to bring legislation topic forward and clarify that the issue must go to the voters?
Okay. Well, thank you, Eric. I was present at the hearing, which took place last week, where Gary Crum, one of our local state senators, came forth with an amendment that would clarify state law, settle the issue once and for all of what portion of state law applies to surface water drainage utilities, such as the one which the city of Laramie is seeking to establish. There is an entire act, the Surface Water Drainage Act, which is Title 16, Chapter 10 of the Wyoming statutes, that governs how surface water drainage utilities are put together and what the requirements are before municipalities can start them. The municipalities are claiming that that entire act doesn't apply, essentially making it meaningless, and that another phrase in Title in a different title, Title 15, completely overrides that and lets them do whatever they want without meeting any of the requirements in Title 16. Now, Title 16 has requirements such as how the tax is going to be collected. It requires it to be collected as part of your property taxes, which is advantageous to citizens because they can go to the federal government on their tax returns and deduct that. It requires an election approving the kind of financing which is being done. That makes sure that you have some fiscal responsibility. It has a bunch of other requirements which are less notable that are also important. That act was originally created with the idea that municipalities would have to be more accountable. They wouldn't just suddenly start billing you for something, and yet the cities want to bypass this. So Senator Crum had a very simple bill which changed only a little bit of language in the law, which specifically called out Title 16 as applying to stormwater management. And, well, the committee listened to testimony from lobbyists from WAM, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, listened to a few citizens.
City leaders also?
Yeah. Yes, and deadlocked 6-6 on whether or not to send this bill to the floor of the legislature. And unfortunately, a tie vote loses in the legislature. So the bill did not go to the floor directly. Now, it's not completely dead. It's possible that Senator Crum could bring this completely as an individual bill, and if the Senate votes to introduce it, it could still happen. But it doesn't have the support of the committee, at least initially. And, well, that just means that the lawsuits are going to drag on. It could be years before we know one way or the other what's going to happen, or in the case of Laramie, we may keep postponing doing anything until we hear. It's going to create kind of a morass. And, all I can say is kudos to Senator Crum for bringing this forth. And also, I'd like to express a little bit of disappointment in the legislature because they didn't go ahead and simply resolve this one way or another.
It was interesting as I sat in on that session that Senator Crum brought that proposed amendment. It was disappointing that there was all of this. It seemed like legislators were out of touch with it, as this is a known problem, this is a known concern, and it affects far more than one legislator's district. Yet they didn't propose resolutions to their own concerns about Senator Crum's proposal. And that, to me, you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And here we're charging people to have a roof over their head.
Yep, and this is something which I have personally brought up with the city council. The impervious surface area for which they want to charge you, for which they want to tax you, includes the roof of your home. Well, you can't have a home that's secure and safe and warm and dry without having a roof over it. And so essentially, this is a tax on the roof over your head. And what I actually proposed to City Council during their weekend retreat this last weekend
at the Municipal Operating Center.
That's right.
How many days was that?
This was a 1 and maybe a quarter day retreat.
Okay.
They started on Friday evening and went into the evening, and then they did. They were going to do a whole day Saturday. They actually finished early and didn't go through the entire day on Saturday, but they went through most of it. So they did have a public comment period at the beginning of that meeting, and I went and commented because I hadn't had an opportunity to do so at the previous city council meeting. And what I proposed to them was that there be there is already an ordinance currently before city council which would impose a cap on how much you could be charged. But there is nothing that imposes a deductible, a floor. It says you should have a certain amount that they don't charge you for. And what I proposed is that they change this, that about 1,000 square feet of roof or whatever is impervious to stormwater, not be charged for. Because if you're a senior on a fixed income, if you're just, you're low end of the economic ladder and you're barely scraping by, you shouldn't be charged just for having 1,000 square feet of roof over your head, which is basically the roof area of a small trailer. You should at least be able to have that much without the city trying to charge you for it.
You also made a suggestion that they lower the $1.67 per 500 unit criteria and actually lower that flat across the board, as opposed to simply putting a cap on outliers and extreme situations that were relative to the amount of property that somebody had, like the University of Wyoming.
Yes, I did. And my thoughts there are as follows. The city is establishing an entire department to deal with stormwater and talking about hiring 5 highly paid employees full-time to deal with stormwater. Now, we do have stormwater events, and we do have maintenance to do. But do we really need the $750,000, $750,000 per year in salaries? This is only in salaries. We're not talking about equipment or supplies or other things in order to run that. Maybe we should find a way to economize a bit. Maybe it should be, say, $500,000 a year. And we can save that money and lower the rate per square foot of impervious area. This is something which council hasn't formally considered yet, and I really think they should. We're not a huge municipality. We're not a rich area. Perhaps we should find ways to economize, still get the job done, but not overspend.
Director Webb in Public Works doing diligent work to propose what City Council has asked of city staff. And in all of the conversations, July 1st, the pause has been extended through July 1st, 2026. And you can expect, frankly, an additional pause to be implemented as litigation proceeds to be processed in the courts.
Yes, unfortunately, that's true, because the legislature has not acted to decide anything. And so July of next year is overly optimistic in terms of how long we can wait before things will be decided. It'll probably go through the end of, the end of the year. And so really, we won't know for a long time. And that's why it's such a shame that the legislature didn't resolve this once and for all. In the meantime, the city could at least come up with a fair scheme. And again, considering having the deductible, considering lowering the rate, because if the courts decide that we have to have an election, this scheme has to appeal to the voters. If we're going to do anything at all, we need the voters to approve it. And they're much more likely to approve it if there's less of a dent in their pocketbook. So we should begin thinking about that now.
It is worthy of note that not all of City Council support this bypassing the voters. There are at least 3 on City Council that have expressed explicitly the preference that this matter go to the voters, and how the utility is funded, that system be voted on by the electorate. That is a fact, and it was actually that division was present December 4th, 2024, when the utility itself was adopted, and it remains consistent today with a new council, a new body of 9 in the collective, also split on the matter.
Well, this is another way that the city could move on with the program. It could choose to observe both Title 15 and Title 16 of the state statutes, have the election, do what's required in Title 16, and then the question, the whole question of which one it should follow, and what their lobbyists are saying about trying to bypass the public, that would all be moot. But City Council has not considered that, and I'm not exactly sure why.
At least not in an open forum.
Yes, maybe we should. Maybe we should simply bypass all of the controversy. Go ahead. Title 16 is not that onerous. Yes, it requires an election, but, well, that produces public support. And, in the future, if people complain, we can say, see, the public voted for this. So quit complaining. So there are a lot of good reasons, I think, to follow Title 16, but so far the city hasn't done it.
I go back to December 4th, 2024, and on third reading, our city attorney, Bob Southard, states upon request from Councilor Shumway for clarity, he asks, why are we deciding this essentially versus putting it to the voters? And Bob Southard's response was, it's been a long time since I've actually read this, and I'm not prepared to make a statement on that at this time. Now, this is third reading. This is third reading for the city of Laramie. If you want to talk about not being prepared for first reading, I think that that's one thing. Second reading, perhaps another thing. But third reading, third and final reading, and the City Council, December 4th, 2024, led by Mayor Harrington, moves forward with a vote. It's not a unanimous vote, it's a split vote, supporting the adoption of the utility. We're not getting our people's representation when City Councilor asks for advice and you move to a vote without tabling the matter. You get a vote anyway. And hey, look at all of the division. Look at all of the uprise in Laramie alone since that date, December 4th, 2024. Perhaps we had a legal opinion rendered by the employee that we pay in the city of Laramie to render such an opinion, perhaps we would have publicly known more that much earlier.
Well, the city council, the city attorney and the city council have an interesting relationship. He is one of the few city employees who's employed directly by city council, which can fire the city attorney at will. And he's got two roles at the same time. One is to render legal opinions, and the other is to support the council regardless of what the law might be, even if it's wrong, if it gets sued or otherwise challenged. And so it's kind of unfortunately the easiest thing for a city attorney to do in that sort of a situation is just not voice an opinion. I'm afraid that's what happened here. It's tough to go to council and say, sorry, you're violating the law. And maybe the city attorney should have. But so far he hasn't done that. He's gone along with what council did and with what the lobbyists at WAM, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, has said to do, which is ignore Title 16, ignore an entire chapter of state law, and let's see if we can get away with it. And that's why we're in the muddle we're in right now.
In my opinion, exclusively my opinion, the last two city council groups in 2024 and last year into this year, those two separate councils, if you take that body of 9 across 2 consecutive years, probably would do, the citizens of Laramie probably would do best to have an elected mayor. An elected mayor would be one additional check, one additional effort to hold accountable city operations where there is such a close relationship between city staff and city council. I mean, one example alone of that close relationship is city councilors do not write their own ordinances. They are written and submitted by city staff to council for approval.
That's right. What's more, the rules of procedure, which were approved, by the way, at the recent retreat, say that an individual city council member can't get the staff to do anything. Several of them have to come forward. So unlike a legislator who can write a bill on their own or get one written by the Legislative Services Office, a city councilor who comes up with a better idea has very little power to even get it rolling unless they first lobby their fellow city councilors. And by the way, that is limited by the state's open meetings law. A city councilor can't get together or even have a conversation with a quorum of the others by email. That's illegal because it has to be a public meeting which is noticed and available to the public. So as a result, even a city councilor with a better idea has a hard time putting it forth. It creates a lot of inertia. It really means that staff is more powerful in many ways than city council.
Who we elect.
That's right. The elected bureaucrats have more power because they're not bound by any of these restrictions.
The hired city staff have more power than the city council. They have more this year than last.
That's right. And so we really have a bureaucracy in Laramie, and the only way to bypass it is for the public to come to the meetings, the official meetings, and get a bunch of city council members to agree to do something. And that's why we all have to be there. It's why public involvement is very important.
You need only go back to YouTube video live stream of city council proceedings and witness November 2025, mid-month, Ward 2 elected representatives, Brandon Newman, Melanie Vigil, and Jim Freed, each acknowledge, the city council as a whole acknowledged that they had issued an incorrect notice of public hearing. Now, it's one thing to put an error in, but it's one thing to violate people's 15-day required notice for a date that doesn't even exist in the 2025 calendar, folks. This is why it's so important that more people attend city council meetings, tune in to city council meetings, write, call, and show up personally and be heard. When you have city council a body of 9 that overall ignore an error affecting people's rights within a zoning change area, you're affecting people who have homes for 30-year loans, probably generational wealth that might get passed, or the home is one of the largest investments, the largest single investments that any one citizen may make in their life. Their car might be their second largest. But when city council, when government bypass what's right, they don't stop and they don't delay it and do it right. Your rights are being violated, folks. Your rights are being impeded on. And you, if you don't say anything, will allow it to happen. And that allowance becomes our own doing, our own undoing. People have a right to have notification. The whole reason that you have public notice is it's implied that it will be accurate notice. So uphold your rights. Be heard. Don't tolerate Vice Mayor Richardson acknowledging and saying how unfortunate it is. Don't bypass holding Jim Freed accountable for acknowledging but moving forward with a vote when they knew and they were advised by the public, by 2 members of the public and more. It was acknowledged by the planning department that there was an error and apologies were submitted. However, what apologies given to people who live within 300 feet of a proposed zoning change that will affect their values of their homes substantially or less substantially, either way, going forward? When you don't do things the right way, don't claim transparency in government. Brett?
Well, yeah, there is a concern there. The fact, unfortunately, is that had they gone ahead and delayed the meeting and issued another notice, in the end, it might have come down just the same way. But the public should have a chance to be informed and should have a chance to show up and at least try to speak to council. When
the government doesn't self-govern according to the rules and procedures that they themselves have set, then my suggestion is you add 1 level additional of elected accountability. And that might be the next step, is a change in government in the city of Laramie. Not because I dislike any one staff member. Todd Fieser, I think fantastic. I've known him for years as he was in Cheyenne prior to here. Parks and Rec director and assistant city manager for a long period of time here in Laramie. And some of my favorite events, I worked with Fieser there. I think he's a great administrator, but the citizens deserve things being done right, accurate, and
we should have an opportunity to elect someone who can put a sign that says "the buck stops here" on their desk. And if we did have an elected mayor, that would do that. So I personally favor having an elected mayor and would like to see us move that way. It'd be nice if council on its own initiative did this, but this is probably going to require a petition drive by the citizens to make it happen.
At the retreat, was that topic brought up about changing the government system in Laramie?
Not at all. The retreat was conducted subject to what we had, and the city council members sat at the tables with the staff members and socialized and and fraternized. They're very chummy with one another, which is
a team building deal for the entire city.
Sort of like a team building exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if they were that sociable with the public. Sometimes when you're a member of the public and you come to council, you feel like it's a more adversarial relationship than that, and it shouldn't be. I'd like to see that change as well.
I agree. I've known interactions, witnessed interactions in public outside of city council meetings where it was extremely adversarial and not open. Went so far as to acknowledge, I don't read what you submit. It's too long. You're not in my district. You're not in my area. Well, there's another problem. Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, there are no individual community issues being brought in the last 2 years specific to any one ward over any other ward. They're not mutually exclusive. They're all intertwined, quite intertwined.
And that's especially true because all of the members of council vote on every issue in the end, so they all need to feel responsible to the citizens. Also, if you take a look at the way the wards are drawn, even neighborhoods which do have specific problems, such as West Laramie with paving and issues with flooding, well, the line between Ward 1 and Ward 2 goes right down the middle of West Laramie, so there's no one ward for which that area needs representation. There are two, and so one thing we also may want to consider doing. It was originally supported by the League of Women Voters, but it didn't turn out to work as well as they had hoped. Is eliminating the ward system and going back to having city council members serve at large. We're not a big enough community to have isolated neighborhoods that need individual representation. What we need instead is responsible council members who will listen to everyone. So this is also just my opinion. I think that we should probably eliminate the ward system at the same time as we consider moving to an elected mayor.
Brett, you attended the Municipal Operations Center event on Saturday, not Friday, correct?
That is right. I went to the retreat on Saturday morning.
Now, at the retreat, we've noted previously this show that members of council, I assume full attendance, not all 9.
Yes, at least one of them left in the middle of the day, but most of them were there the entire time.
And then members of city staff were present.
That's correct.
However, I only viewed on YouTube, and it was very difficult to see many times here. I did appreciate it being televised, though, as I was able to tune in in a busy Saturday. But as I was on and looking, I didn't see any citizens of Laramie without title, without any specific involvement. I didn't see that integration into the team building. So it seems that theoretically, the people of Laramie were excluded.
Well, they weren't excluded. There were actually chairs laid out for the public to occupy.
Were they invited to the tables that the discussions were going on?
The public wasn't invited to the individual tables, but there were chairs sort of in the middle where you could see what was going on. However, if there were members of the public observing, they must have done it over video because I was the only member of the public who showed up and commented in person. I didn't see anyone else there who was a member of the public. A couple of times, I wasn't officially part of the event also, so I didn't speak up except when they had the public comment period. I did pass a couple of notes when I thought there were items of interest, but it really did feel like this was an event that was exclusive to the council and the staff.
And given the pledge that public comment is wanted, and the call for public comment being made meeting after meeting, it's very telling to me when the public doesn't get a seat at the table in such a fashion. And I'm talking, obviously city staff are members of the community. Obviously city council are members of the community. And perhaps you don't want such a large undertaking, to develop. But how many tables were there in the room?
4 or 5.
And to not have as many as 5 individual citizens brought into the group, you know, I guess no matter what you do, if people are going to doubt the system, they're going to not trust the system, then they would be critical of who was selected to be on the table.
Yeah. You know, Eric, that's a very constructive suggestion. Maybe they should have had a select group of citizens, maybe one per table, there to interact with the staff and the council. Maybe that's something we should propose for future years.
I would go back to July 2025 in a very intense public meeting, and it was a Fifth Tuesday event, wasn't it? Wasn't that a Fifth Tuesday event in the fire station in West Laramie?
Oh yes, July that was the most raucous and well attended Fifth Tuesday meeting that I think we've ever had.
So what if some of the most passionate speakers at that occasion were brought and invited in to the planning session for 2026? Wouldn't that be an outstanding measure of building consensus? If you were to have a 30 and 40 year member of our community, maybe Pat Rinker, maybe Tom Mortimer, maybe people, maybe others beyond those two. Perhaps you have some of those that I remember one citizen who maybe 10 or 15 years ago was much more active in public comment with the city and city interaction. I believe his name's Tim Hale. He spoke passionately at the city council. If you bring these members, if you bring a group of these leaders in the community and opinion leaders to such an event, assuming that they would even attend, but if they were given the opportunity, I got to believe that each of them might take notice and participate in such and give valuable, extremely important input and perspective from the people, not elected, but here through time. And I believe that might include some wisdom that might be valid.
Yes, well, Eric, I agree with you. I think the public should have been more involved in the goal setting that took place at the retreat. That might be one way to do it. Again, this is a constructive suggestion that I think that we should forward to council and the staff for next year's. It's too late to change things now, but for next year's retreat, because it really would be good to have more public input. I felt a little out of sorts being the only member of the public who physically showed up to the retreat, and I would have liked to see more. Maybe if they were invited, they felt like they were involved, then we'd have a better outcome and one that was more consistent with what the public wants.
Brett, why do you do it? Why did you show up Saturday? Why do you do this weekly program on the Talk Shop? Why?
Well, because I have a big stake in Laramie, because I've settled here, because I've invested here, because, well, a lot of my personal happiness depends on how much I can enjoy in this community, and I want to see Laramie prosper. I don't want to see it become like every place else. I don't want to see it become like just like the other places that I decline to live in order to come here. Laramie is a wonderful community. It's unique. It's friendly. It doesn't suffer from a lot of the problems that you see especially in large urban centers. I want to see us exploit that. I want to see us enjoy that. And I want to participate in making it happen.
In 2023, there was a Zen City study that returned overall citizen satisfaction in the Laramie government being 21%. In 2024, that number it was increased to 28 or 29%. Now, this is overall satisfaction in city government. A failing number. In fact, it was most interesting that the Zen City presenter added in the neutral vote and called it good for the city of Laramie. The neutral vote, not for, not against, was added into the low 21 and 28% to bring just over 50% satisfaction in the city. Now, we don't have, I guess about next month, we'll probably be seeing the Zen City 2025 survey results, and we'll see how that number changes, up, down, maybe flat, who knows. But do you feel city operations have improved, Brett, in 2023, 2024, and 2025?
I'm not sure they have. I think if the city has intensified its bureaucracy. One thing we've seen is a lot more regulation that makes it harder to do things, makes it harder to fix things, makes it harder to improve things. As for the issue of whether we should include neutral votes in our score as a positive thing, well, that's kind of a mixed bag. One thing that I discovered when I campaigned last year for a seat on the city council, and I came close to winning one. I didn't quite, but I came pretty close. Was that I learned a lot about people's attitudes, and most people in Laramie are either here on an itinerant basis. They're doing something like going to the university, or they just expect government to kind of work on its own without too much involvement. And if their attitude was neutral, maybe that's because they just expected that. Maybe, I'm not sure if it deserves to be counted as completely positive, but maybe that is a positive thing. Maybe if they didn't have anything to complain about, maybe the neutrality isn't too bad. But what I was really concerned about was when the election came, you took a look down at the list of votes, and in every ward throughout the city, the number one category of votes for city council was this, or the number one vote winner was this guy, I don't know who he is, named Joe Undervotes. I know, I'm being facetious here. Really, there were more undervotes for every seat on city council than there were votes for anybody. People were just apathetic. They were just hoping government would just work. And the reason why I'm doing these morning shows and getting out there and speaking to council and commenting on social media is because I don't think we can afford to be apathetic. What's happening, I think, is a slow degradation in public control of what's going on. I think there is too much bureaucracy. I think it's stifling things. People are complaining about affordable housing, and yet it is so tough to build housing here. Almost every complaint that they have, in fact, is that way. The city is making it tougher to fix the problems that people do complain about. And so that's why I'm involved, and that's what I think people need to be involved with throughout the city. We need to make sure that by default, by not interacting with government, by not urging it to improve things, we don't wind up with a worse situation than we already have.
Brett Glass, if you were to look at the issue at hand being citizen property owners charged for impervious surfaces like the roof over their head, would you say that supports affordable housing or detracts from affordable housing?
Well, that's exactly the reason why I brought it up. It makes housing less affordable. And yeah, they'll say, well, it's only a few dollars each month. Well, those dollars add up, and then all the other charges add up, and you get nickeled and dimed to death. And that's happening in most areas of our lives. We have in the grocery store, we have not only prices going up, but we have shrinkflation, where the package gets smaller. And, you're supposed not to notice that. Okay, maybe you just get a little bit less. It adds up. And eventually it really does impact our quality of life. So we need to watch for these incremental changes that altogether are going to make a big difference.
In direct expenditures, just observing 2025 city council and city staff operations alone, did you witness spending that was contrary to affordable living in Laramie, Wyoming?
Well, in some ways, yes. The stormwater drainage initiative being one of the biggest ones. But there were also little things. There were also some purchases that I didn't think were well made, and the city didn't shop around enough. I commented on that. Council just went ahead with staff's recommendation and didn't look into it. We approved a tax credit housing project from a company that turned out to be a shell company that basically was a post office box at a UPS store in Idaho. We approved bargain basement chip sealing of our streets, where the deal we got was that we were charged half as much. That seemed like a great deal, but we didn't thoroughly check out the provider of the services and see whether they were going to do a good job. And in fact, they did not do a good job. There were parts of the street that just weren't covered at all, and the quality of the work wasn't that good. So in that way, seemed to be penny wise, but in fact we were pound foolish. So yes, I think there needs to be more attention paid to how we're spending our money. I think council needs to be more critical of that and not just leave it to staff, which may, if we don't hold their feet to fire and say, really check this out and do your due diligence, we may not get what we're paying for. This is especially true because this next year on our ballots, when we get to the general election, there's going to be an initiative to cut our property taxes, and that in turn is going to cut city funding. We're going to need to be especially careful with how our money is spent when the city is getting less money. And by the way, this doesn't affect just the city, it affects the county as well. So everybody is going to be affected by this if it goes through.
One such observation that I made in 2025 was with respect to over $200,000 in city funding that was spread throughout the community, sometimes in many cases very powerful, very valuable ways, in ways that weren't being covered by city or county staffing or departmental creation in and of itself. So one such example is Laramie Connections. Laramie Connections providing transportation, mostly related to health care and rides to and from appointments. And that organization announced in the last 4 weeks discontinuing that. And they were one of the recipients of City of Laramie funds. Now, I don't know if those funds were conveyed. Perhaps they haven't. Perhaps they're returned. I don't know with respect to that. But there are a number of initiatives where the city extends funds, and those entities might even go so far as to lobby against citizens of Laramie. Now, that happened in parking. Retailers in historic downtown Laramie in 2023 were threatened by a 50-year lease being considered for abatement, discontinuance. Now that lease is valid on the Landmark Square property through 2042. And it's no longer owned by the two families, the two interests that did own it. They sold it to the Stencil Group. The Stencil Group, who knows what they will do with it, but they were supported by city funds supporting city entities, applicants for these monies, and in doing so, those entities actually lobbied against our own citizens, our own retailers. And as they did that, they're not accountable to even speaking on the topic. They're not accountable to answering questions. It's difficult to be journalistic and seek out the information when parties don't come forward, when they don't volunteer to have those conversations. Accountability becomes more apt to be successful by discontinuing funding to those groups, those organizations, which I'm not entirely in favor of, but I dislike when organizations and leaders, executive directors, do not come to the microphone. They are not accountable to you, the audience's questions. Always. It's very selective. And in some of these cases, the matters considered they're very dire. They can affect you and your family's investment forever forward. And that is a change that deserves every diligence. And our city spending money in this way or that way goes to that overall satisfaction, I think. I think it goes back to the Zen 23, the Zen 24 studies, and soon to be released, the Zen 25 data. We'll see what that brings forward. And if you have satisfaction or dissatisfaction, by all means, come forward. There are all too few that come to the podium in the first 3 minutes of any city council meeting and say how excited they are about what's going on, how proud they are to live in Laramie. And that is something to pay attention to. Now, do people complain more or do they applaud more? Well, I would say applause is usually quieter than the complaints. But that doesn't make the complaint any less valid. Brett Glass, thank you for your time here this morning on the Talk Shop. Each and every week, we appreciate you and what you do. And this segment brought to you by Pole Mountain Pharmacy, dedicated to the health and wellness of Southeast Wyoming from their location at 4th and Harney. And the fine services locally of Lariat.net, your internet service provider.